Who wants to know what the next Climate Leaders Insight is called? I mean, are we allowed to say the S word? We are. Shall I do a poll? While you come up, I'm going to do a poll. So this panel is called Panel. It's actually a Climate Leaders Live. Mark, get it right. Climate Leaders Live. It's 20 minutes. It's short. This Climate Leaders Live is called Solving Climate Change. In our dairy farms, the SH1T doesn't stink, and the cows burp sustainably. Is there anyone here that minds if I say shit? Thank you. In this day and age, it's always good to just check these things. We will say shit from now on. Right, let's get cracking. Gentlemen, please get on the stage. Daniele Aspesi, Global Solutions Director, Resident Technology. Come and sit here, Daniele. Marco Poglianella, Founder, Executive Chairman, Chief Science Officer, Resident Technology as well. Sit down. Sachin Gupta, who's going to be joining us. I'll introduce him in a second. David first. David Grimes. Sachin Gupta, Global Agricultural Solutions Lead, IBM, and David Grimes, Senior Consultant, World Bank. For some reason, Sachin, I thought you were going to be virtual, but even you were virtual when I last saw you. But it's brilliant to see you in the flesh. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And you're okay, everyone, if I use the shit word, yeah? Yeah, good. Let's get started. Right, this is going to be so good. There's a lot to discuss. David, just so we all are on the same page, because we're not all as well-versed in this subject as you are and everyone on stage, just explain to us innocents, the impact of dairy farms on the atmosphere. What real impact do dairy farmers have on the atmosphere? The science, because I know you're the science guy on this panel.
Yes. So basically, there's about a 35% impact agriculture has.
Yeah.
Of that, livestock is of the largest contribution to that, and dairy has significant impact in that livestock. Percentage. And what I can say about dairy is that one of the pledges that was made last week by the leaders was a reduction of methane.
Yes.
And in manure management, which is a production of the dairy activity, is the production of methane. Yeah. And it is a significant contributor to the methane problem, of anthropogenic sources of methane. And so dairy is in the spotlight in terms of how we're going to move forward. But like all of you, who doesn't like cheese? And I don't want to just leave this with cattle. This is also sheep and goats. And as a lifestyle, really, I've been to several developing countries in the world. They still like their milk. They still like their cheese. And so we need to look to find solutions to address this issue without necessarily saying that you have to eliminate dairy production.
Just as well, we've got Resident Technologies with us, because it's all about solutions. So Marco, tell us about Resident. I hope you were all watching. Resident spoke a little bit earlier. Tell us about Resident's role in the industry and your sustainability practice perspective.
Well, this is exactly our role in this industry, to provide solution. So we are a company that are able to give a solution that we can act now. That is for sure could be a lot of R&D that we can do in the future. But the main difference that today there are farmers that are reducing methane emissions. Today there are farmers that are reducing N2O emission. That today there are farmers, and can be more and more, of course, that where the shit doesn't stink. And that is important, because the odor is one thing, but unfortunately, let me say unfortunately, the methane, N2O, and CO2 don't have odor. And that could be a good in one sense, but a bad, because we don't perceive their presence. And having the possibility to reduce something very important for the neighbor, for the social life, as well as for environment, combined to increasing the ROI, increasing the applicability of the solution, because at the end, the farmers need to make money, to stay on the business. And so how we can combine the needs of environment, the needs of the social, of the people, the needs of the future of the farmers together. That is why we were born, and Resonant can provide this solution. I repeat, actually now.
Yeah. This is the only time in my life I'm going to be able to ask this question in my life, in public, on a stage. So I'm going to just make the most of it. The question is, why does your shit not smell? This is from a science perspective. Because I said to them, why didn't you bring it in? Why didn't you bring it in, put it on the stage, and we could see why doesn't it smell, how doesn't it smell, and that would be such a great PR stunt.
We tried to, that we had a little issue with the customs. So, we were at the show, trade show last week, and we actually had a large bowl of manure to show this. Actually, shit is a technical word, so we are allowed to use it.
We are.
And just as David was mentioning, liquid manure is the source of all these greenhouse gases, emissions, but also a source of ammonia. This is another important aspect that livestock industry contributes to. Ammonia, 94% of it comes from agriculture in the entire world. So all these emissions, the methane or nitrous oxide from manure, also methane from enteric fermentations, are a source sourced from microbial activity. The odors as well. So the idea is that resonance solutions technologies and solutions can influence the microbial activities within the rumen of the animals, because we don't have to forget that methane, enteric methane, comes from burps and not from farts, which is another technical term. And there are processes and byproducts of microbial fermentation. The same thing goes, for example, if you open your fridge and you have something that smells bad, it went spoiled because of microbial molds activity. The same goes for manure. The fact that some manure is smelling is because some parasitic fermentation occurred, which can be driven, can be slowed down in order to help manure to ferment in a better way, to become a better value fertilizer that can then displace for some synthetic fertilizer in the light of circular economy, of which dairy is a good example of.
Yeah, Sachin, there's so much great stuff to discuss. I mean, technology, how it's digitized. I mean, which dairy processes or which workflows are most tech-enabled and which ones are the laggards?
Yeah, so essentially you have to understand, and building on David's point, if you look at agriculture as a whole, about 30% of global emissions are from agriculture, 10% of which are just from dairy, and 90% of that is just from the cattle, more from the front than the back. So the most difficult parts in terms of doing the dairy sustainability are really the measurement, standards, and awareness. So measurement really means, you have paucity of data. Sometimes you don't have data. Sometimes you have insufficient data. Sometimes, you have data that you have to sort of approximate. So these are not primary emission data, but data that kind of exists outside that you can kind of use. Second is, what exactly are we measuring against what standards? And there are standards that are being defined, but I think there is more that the industry can do around defining those standards.
Are we making tangible progress on standards, Sachin, or not? Or is it just a bit slow and wading through mud?
I think it has been gathering pace,
Yeah.
In recent times. And I should say that, there are associations and consortiums that are now working on bringing those global standards. Otherwise they were more country-specific, geo-specific, barn-specific, etc. But now there is progress that is happening. I think we can do more. I hope that will happen. But once we have the standards, it is much easier for us to measure, what we want to measure against. And I think third is the awareness. How do you really get the farmers to be part of this?
Yeah.
Okay. For them, it is essentially the monetization and the certainty that they want to have around what they are delivering. So if we can tie in these things, make a business model that kind of works, make it an outcome-based model, I think it works for everyone.
Yeah, it's a complex system, isn't it, David? The dairy farm. Just explain to us the complexity. I love this stat. If you took all the cows, you'd have the third largest country in terms of methane emission. Wow.
So there are a lot of complexities that I'm going to say starts with the actual dairy owner. And you've got to recognize that we've been talking about climate change for quite a few years. And even in the last panel, they talked about the importance of action, but action at the local level. This is not a foreign concept. This has been talked about almost from the first set of COPs that I participated in. And so at the farm level, you've got to find what motivates the farmer. This particular aspect, when you think about it, dairy in many parts of the world is pretty marginal with respect to profitability for these farmers. So introducing new regulations and new practices is very difficult. So you have to position this kind of change to the farmer itself, to themselves. What is the value proposition for the farmer? And it starts there. And one of the aspects, of course, is if the world comes to the point of being able to monetize carbon, then there's an incentive being built in at the farm level for how a dairy farmer can be looking at making a positive contribution to the environment. So we've got to build the incentive programs to make this work.
Yeah, Marco, the value proposition to the farmer, is it a hard sell for you, to explain that, to paint that picture to the farmer? Because it seems so compelling, it seems so obvious to me, but I'm not a dairy farmer, so,
Well, the farmers are conservative, and but at the same time they have a culture of adaptation, and they want for sure be innovative, but at the same time they need to survive, but need to make money. I repeat, to stay on the business. So to speak with them is it's easy, but at the same time they won't test, they won't prove. That is why working with IBM could be very important, because we can collect data to show without any only perception. The title provocative of today is about the odor, and for sure the odor is super easy to say, to smell, because you technically no smell the odor. Yeah. But for the rest, to have some gases that are colorless, odorless, we have to make measurement. So that can create a complexity where the technology can help us to deliver our solution and to create particularly the value chain. Because the farmers, the dairy farmers, you have to always remember that sometimes in few cases they sell directly the milk, but normally they are in the very large and long value chain. They provide the milk to collect the milk, to transform the milk, put in the retail. All these chain have to be sustainable if you want to grow up in the future. Yeah. And we have to monitor to all the chain, starting from the farm, starting at the dairy level.
Yeah, Daniel, I know you wanted to jump in.
Yes, what Marco said is 100% correct. The dairy industry is under a lot of pressure. It has been for a number of years. If we think of Europe and the quota system that disappeared, but is still unofficially enforced, the raise in price on the raw materials that they use, both for feed and for fertilization. So feeling that they are under pressure to reduce emissions that they know they have, because it's not a secret. And they are afraid of being asked to do the impossible once more. So the idea that we have and the partnership we have with IBM of the project of certifying the sustainable farmer that our CEO mentioned this morning is to give back some power to the farmer to show that they are moving towards a more sustainable path. They did already a lot towards that. And the ability to show that what they do help them to improve their own productivity, their livelihood, and also have a benefit on the environment is something that is the key to really help them transition to a more sustainable
Tell us how the
practices.
partnership works, Sachin, with Resonant, how you work with companies like Resonant.
So think about the value chain, right? So if you were to certify a sustainable farm, a dairy farm, what you need are 4 stages. You have measurements, then you have planning, you have implementation, and then the certification. And we are providing technology to help Resonant kind of achieve that. Essentially building a consortium, bringing in certification companies, bringing in standards company to kind of build this and ensure that we have the data, we have the AI, we have the IoTs, we have the sensors, we have technologies like blockchain coming all together to create this sort of network where anybody downstream can essentially know where this milk has come from, is it sustainable, non-sustainable, and be able to push the the value to the stakeholders. That's how we're doing it.
And if I can add another thing, another data that not everybody knows is that if we take a bottle of milk, a liter of milk, 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions are generated at farm level. So whatever food company that wants to reduce its carbon footprint need to address the emissions at farm level. So again, the dairy farmers are on the spotlight again, and they have to do all the work, basically, and getting a little margin of the entire value that is created with their own product. So again, bringing them, and this is why the program is called Certifying the Sustainable Farmer, is because we want to put them in the center, not just because we want them to be responsible for emissions, but because they can really act to change things.
Can you just elaborate further on corn, the importance of corn? Because we love corn, probably most of us. It's such an important ingredient in the world, but very few of us actually understand what the role of corn is in a dairy farm.
Corn on modern Western dairy farms represents nearly 50% of the feed that the cow consumes. And just to give you a number, regular dairy cow that produces Parmigiano Reggiano. No, Parmigiano Reggiano don't use corn. There's a slight distinction, but Grana Padano, it's another very famous Italian cheese, eat about 50 kilos of feed a day. 25 kilos are made of corn silage. Corn is an intensive, very productive crop, but it requires a lot of inputs, both on water and fertilizers. The idea of stimulating and working with the microbiome in the soil and in the manure, we touched it before, to reduce the amount of fertilizers required there, also help dairy farmer to increase and to improve their carbon footprint, and not just the dairy farmer, but everybody that then processes and sells the milk afterwards.
Yeah, you mentioned the word stimulate, which brings me to you, Dave. We've got about 3 minutes left. I want to give you all 45 seconds each to stimulate, stir, rouse, inspire our audience so they go to a wonderful plant-based lunch, which we had yesterday, and I know it's going to happen today as well. So 45 seconds each to rouse the rabble.
So a lot of, we get caught up in discussing the issue of, in particularly dairy, and we think about it and look at it through the lens of often the developed world. I mean, we looked at Europe and it gives some examples of that. But reality is when you go into the developing world and you look at these operations, they lack the technology and the sophistication. And when you consider that the population distribution in the world between developed and developing, for me, the focus of the future is how we bring technologies such as resin technologies, How do we bring that to the developing world so they actually leapfrog the benefits and can realize the gains and make a significant contribution to the health of the planet?
Well said, Sachin.
I think each of us are here wearing two hats. One is corporate, we are representing our companies, other is personal. And sometimes we think about all these long-term goals of net zero, etc. I would say that each of us, if we take small steps towards sustainability, when we walk into the retail stores, let's use recyclable, reusable bags, not use plastic, do whatever we can. Each of us in our personal capacities, and for corporates, it is becoming a business imperative anyways. So let's take those steps. I think the long term will come itself, together.
Yeah, Marco?
I like what you said. Exactly, because every single drops can constitute the ocean. And that is exactly what we have to do. And we have to make pressure on your favorite brands. When you buy a product, everybody is a vote in the supermarket, in the retail. And that is where we have to create the pull effect that can be go on all the chain. And so the most important part for me is that solutions are available now. We don't have to wait and to think about 2070. Today, we don't have time. We have to act today, and it's possible.
We do have solutions, yeah. Daniele, this is it. This is the final chance before lunch. Go for it.
Marco's right. We have solutions that can be used now, today, to make changes. Solutions that harness the power of nature to get back to a better state and improve sustainability overall.
I think we'll all agree that was a brilliant panel. Thank you so much. Big hands. Gentlemen, you may leave the stage. Thank you so much to Daniele, Marco, Sachin, and David. Brilliant.